Welcome to Latte with a Lawyer, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the stories of some of America's most successful lawyers, figuring out what makes them tick, how they creatively solve problems, and how others aspiring to be them can follow in their footsteps. Here's your host, Jacob Wells.
All right, welcome to Latte with a Lawyer. I'm your host, Jacob Wells, and today I'm really excited because we have a great episode for you. Here's our guest, Howard Schweitzer. Welcome to the show.
Jacob, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. I know you're a pretty busy guy, but before we get into the episode, can you just give our listeners a bit of an overview of who you are?
Sure. So I'm Howard Schweitzer. I am the CEO of Cozen O'Connor Public Strategies, which is the government affairs arm of Cozen O'Connor, which is an AmLaw 100 law firm. I'm also a shareholder in the law firm, but we have a separate subsidiary, Cozen O'Connor Public Strategies. That's where I spend most of my time. And we advise clients on issues relating to government, the federal government, and then state and local government as well, specifically in New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Virginia. But we really go coast to coast and advise clients across the country on issues relating to how they interface with government.
Cool. And I know based on some of the bio about you that I read, you have a lot of history working with government. And like you said, now you're working with government as well. When you wanted to become a lawyer, when you were in college and trying to figure out what you want to do, how did you first of all get into the legal side of things and then shift your focus within that into working with government?
Yeah, well, Jacob, when I was in college, I mean, I'd always been interested in kind of politics, and um, went to University of Michigan undergrad, go blue, and then chose to go to law school in Washington at GW because I wanted to be in DC, in and around the intersection of law, politics, and government. I did a semester in Washington during college. That was my version of study abroad. So
yeah, how was
it
that?
was kind of always something I was interested in.
Right. So what was that semester abroad in DC like?
So I had an internship and we did course rotation. We had all sorts of interesting guest speakers, senators, people in government, and it was fascinating. And I actually interned for a guy back then who had a lobbying practice. And so the roots of what I do now were kind of sown back in 1990 when I was doing that internship.
Gotcha. So back in 1990, what did the political landscape look like? What were you focusing on? What was really some of the key issues that appealed to you and kind of inspired you to affect change?
I was always interested in issues related to foreign policy, um, Israel related issues, but I wouldn't say I was like super focused
Mm-hmm.
back then. And I've always had a kind of a broad range of interests, and I guess that's kind of the story of my career. I've always been a bit of a generalist.
Mm-hmm.
I like doing lots of different things, and um, keeps life interesting. And that's kind of the way I've approached my career.
Right. Gotcha. And I know you brought up Israel a bit. I don't want to go into it too much, but with everything happening now, do you have anything that's on your mind regarding that?
It's a very complicated, obviously, part of the world.
Hmm.
Um, and the media, I mean, look, it's serious what's going on now. Obviously, it looks like, they're on the brink of I don't know whether to call it war, but it's obviously
Yeah.
very serious. But the if I've learned anything in Washington in the past however many years it's been now, it's that you can't operate on the basis of just the headlines, because things get distorted.
Hmm.
And I haven't was texting the other day with a friend of mine who's over there. I think we have to take a wait and see, and I think there may be something going on below the level of the headlines that um kind of de-escalates this, but we'll see.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Um, so you were saying earlier that that you are a lawyer, but that you are not the traditional lawyer, and that you work with government a lot. Can you talk a little bit about uh, some of the things that are similar, some of the things that are different, and how, despite what you're doing now, that education and practice has informed what you do now?
Yeah. uh, So, I mean, lawyers at the end of the day are, yeah, you go to law school, you learn how to kind of think like a lawyer. But not every lawyer is walking into a courtroom and arguing cases, or, um, handling murder trials or whatever it is. It's
Right,
like
right.
the television dramatization of what being a lawyer means is very different than it means in practice. And I believe any good lawyer can do anything. You may have to learn the substance, but at the end of the day, practicing law is about issue spotting and good judgment. And my
Hmm.
philosophy has always been, if you have the ability to spot issues and good critical thinking skills, good judgment, you kind of layer that on top of um, a situation, and you usually can get all the way there, or if not all the way there, pretty darn close.
Hmm.
And um, so that's kind of my philosophy. That's my work philosophy generally.
Right.
When I was a baby lawyer, I worked at a firm for a year, and then went into the government. I went into an in-house role, so to speak, at the Export Import Bank, which is a government corporation that finances U.S. exports to emerging markets. And I started out there as um, the at the bottom of the ladder in a
Yep.
group of 25 plus lawyers with incredible credentials, most of whom were doing transactional law. They were deal lawyers
Hmm.
doing project finance transactions. And what I tried to do was kind of use common sense and good judgment, and work really hard. One of the things about being in government is, I mean, people do work hard, particularly lawyers, because there's like a professional dedication. But um, people in government, it's a different cadence. And
Yeah,
so
for
my
sure.
view was, if you're looking to um, really make a name for yourself, like I was when I was young,
Hmm.
just work really, really hard like really put in the effort, and there will be opportunities to kind of move up the food chain. It was an
Mhm.
unorthodox way to start my career, but it proved itself out. I was able to move up and take on more responsibility over time.
Right. So you mentioned that a lot of what people think of when they think of lawyers is what they see on TV, a guy in the courtroom, um, some Johnny Cochran like guy, right? Um, Growing up, was that something that initially appealed to you, or you kind of saw through the what's portrayed in Hollywood to something more meaningful? And was there a role model that you looked up to?
There wasn't a role model per se. I mean, I always liked I was like kind of arguing my side
Mhm.
of an issue.
Yeah.
Um, my friends from my high school history class who are still very close friends of mine
Oh
will
wow.
tell you that I liked arguing my side of an issue, but um, I wouldn't say I had a role model per se. And look, I think when you're young, you don't really know. I think it's a rare person that really knows what they want to do. And I think life takes twists and turns,
Hmm.
and your career takes twists and turns. And um, the key is to capitalize on the opportunities. But I never in a million years could have told you back when I was a teenager that I was going to have the unusual career
Yeah.
that I've had.
I got to ask you about the teenage Howard. What was it like in high school? You got to give me a story of the arguing. Is there anything that comes to mind?
The teenage Howard, most of those are not fit for the airwaves. You're better
Yeah,
off asking my friends and parents. But
gotcha.
um, but there was a kid in my high school history class. I'll just use that, who was like super liberal, and I was kind of more conservative. And every day, Isaiah Rothberg and I would go into history class, and it was kind of the no nukes movement of the, in the 1980s, and
Yeah.
we duke it out. And he, of course, became a right winger, and I guess I was persuasive. He joined the Israeli Defense Forces, and um, the rest is history. But anyway.
Yeah, I'll take it. That's great. So speaking of all the politics and all that, you worked in a pretty high level political role with the Bush administration, Clinton administration, Obama administration. Um, what was it like working with such different presidents, and what was it that exactly that you were doing there?
So I really kind of broke through under Bush. Um, One thing led to another. I'd worked my way up to being deputy general counsel of the Exim Bank, where I mentioned I started earlier. And um, it was the second George W. Bush term, and I was very close with um, our, our acting chairman, who made me acting general counsel. And then we kind of moved into the permanent roles together. Both of those were um, presidential appointments, and uh, it was amazing, totally amazing, and probably just a fascinating job, because it's not just when you're in that kind of a role, you're the general counsel of a federal agency. You are, as I said, you're you're the consigliere, not just the general counsel. You
Yeah.
are applying your judgment, and it's much more a senior kind of political slash legal slash just kind of general advisor kind of role. And so, yeah, this was an agency with a $50 billion portfolio and doing huge deals around the
Wow.
world, and very involved in things like the economic dialogue with China back then, and all sorts of fascinating things that I was able that I had a seat at the table for negotiations with Congress and the State Department and the Treasury Department. And I'll tell you that things don't change, or back then didn't change that much from administration to administration. Like, again, this like goes to the headlines thing. Like, there's not that much difference between a George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Joe Biden administration, Bill Clinton administration. There's like, yes, at the level of the headlines, yes, at the level of kind of macro policy, they're different. Day to day, they're not that different. And most of the decisions that get made would get made in any of those administrations. The Trump administration, that was different.
I was going to ask.
That was different.
Yeah.
But by and large, you know, in the course of a normal administration, things just don't change that much.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because definitely it's a more polarizing time nowadays. And what do you think there was anybody as that was obviously not as polarizing, but was there anybody that was different than, so those three that you said wasn't much of a difference? Would you say there was any politician that comes to mind that was a stark contrast?
Well, remember in 2008, which is when I moved over to Treasury to stand up the bank bailout, the TARP for Hank Paulson. We had a presidential election going on concurrently with attempting to combat the financial crisis. And it was John McCain running against Barack Obama, and John McCain picked Sarah Palin as his vice presidential running mate. And a lot of people look back at Sarah Palin as kind of the first Trumpy kind of yeah. So I would say Sarah Palin. I mean, you always had your people like Bernie Sanders, who still, you know, he's a more potent political force than he was back then, but in his own way, I mean, I think he's pretty from the other side of things. I mean, he's not I don't know. I think he's pretty Trumpy in a lot of ways. So you've always had people, but that was a national ticket. And this out of nowhere pick. And I think John McCain is still kicking himself from his grave that he picked Sarah Palin, because it was obviously it backfired. It was a horrendous choice. It came down to her, Joe Lieberman, and he went with Sarah Palin, and it was not a good thing.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting comparison. I haven't thought about Sarah Palin in a while. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how the political landscape has changed recently. And
look, you know, people think that I think that what we did in 0809 from a policy point of view, which had to be done, in many ways precipitated some of the Trumpy politics we've been through. You know, bailouts and bonuses for Wall Street don't play well on Main Street, nor should they. And as much as we had to do what we did, I think it precipitated a lot of the political fallout that ultimately led to Trump getting elected in 2016. What I would tell people is that was part of the political workout, that the financial workout took 10 years, that the political workout also had to kind of run its course. Unfortunately, nobody anticipated a global pandemic on top of that. And so, I mean, Joe Biden is a much more stable and traditional figure
For sure.
by a mile. You know, but it's still a very politically polarizing time, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think the shifts that we've been through are reflective of kind of the fact that that Main Street was being left behind.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about recently how we've reached this boiling point, and you may not like the other half of the country, but they're still out there. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on what to do with those people that don't feel like they're being heard, because, you know, if you live in a big urban area like I do, like in New York, you don't really see what goes on in the rest of the world, and they're still out there. So what is is there a solution to this?
I mean, it's all about people's feeling of security, and that translates to jobs, income, wealth, feeling, you know, the feeling comfortable. And there's been, because of a bunch of different factors, this economic dislocation that is troubling. And so I think you have to think about things like this in long-term, broad terms. And so things like skills training. And I think Biden he has this American jobs plan, this, you know, obviously green jobs are very important. I think transforming our workforce, it's all about jobs. A lot of jobs, low wage, low paying jobs have gone overseas. Some of that is maybe coming back to some extent, but I think we have to create opportunity. We have to look to the future and create opportunity. And we have to be thoughtful about the haves versus the have-nots. And I'm a free market kind of guy, but you have to be thoughtful about conscious capitalism and making sure that the little guy isn't left behind by the big guy, and that, you know, those are tough things to grapple with.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. That's a interesting insight into that. So I want to switch up the direction of the conversation a little bit. For anybody that's listening out there that is an aspiring lawyer or somebody who wants to go into politics, what would your advice be for them?
My advice would be do as I say, not as I do. Make sure you really want to be a lawyer if you're going to spend the money to go to law school. You know, because by and large, day to day, I mean, I am a lawyer. I am a good lawyer. But I think you don't have to go to law school to go into lobbying and politics and
Right.
government. And so I tell people, sure, it's a great education. It's also a very, very expensive education. And I really only think you should go to law school if when you come out of law school, you want to be a lawyer. And I can't tell you how many conversations I have because I talk to people's kids all the time along these lines.
Yeah.
And that's my best advice. But it comes with a do as I say, not as I do caveat, because I didn't follow my own advice. It's, I think if you're going to go to law school, you need to learn how to practice law. You have to leave law school and go work for a big firm where you learn to think with precision. And in Rolls Royce terms, I went into government after a short stint at a law firm. And in government, I always say you're trying to build a Chevrolet and not a Rolls Royce. In a law firm, you have to build a Rolls Royce. You have to be right. And that's the best way to learn how to practice law. Then you can go and do all sorts of different things. And God knows, I mean, there are a million lawyers doing a million running companies and investing and this and that. But if you're going to spend the money and the time, I personally, it's not a fun way to spend 3 years for me anyway. It wasn't. Just know that you want to do it.
Yeah,
That's my best advice.
absolutely. Love to hear that. So in terms of other education that people could get outside of the classroom, what's one book that has inspired you, whether it be law or anything in general, honestly? If you could bring one book to the office tomorrow, what would that book be? Sorry to put you on the spot.
There's a book called The Medici Effect, which is about, it's not a law book. It's about the Medici family from the Renaissance
Florence,
period.
right?
Yes, in Florence. And it's about how they thrived by bringing together a variety of disciplines and ways of looking at the world. And that's what made the whole greater than the sum of the parts. And I just think I find it fascinating. It's interesting. It informs things like diversity, but I just think it's a very instructive lesson from all sorts of points of view in business. Like you have to bring multiple perspectives to the table. You don't make the best decisions by listening to the same people say the same thing each and every day. You have to hear from different people and look at things from a diversity of viewpoints. And that's how you make a thoughtful and informed decision. And that's how I think about things from a business point of view. And ultimately, lawyers are in many ways business advisors, and it's not just, you're not practicing within the four corners of some textbook. You're practicing within the context of a business reality. And you have to bring a business mindset to that reality, or you're not serving your clients. So that's my what's one of my go-tos.
That's interesting. That's a theme that's kind of come up before, is the business side of things. And it's interesting that you brought up the Medici family, because that was something that was huge when I went to the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. They kept bringing up the Medici family, and something that I wanted to explore more. So definitely got to check out that book. And that definitely resonates with me. And I've heard that before about hiring with diversity, because everybody has weaknesses, and you can hire people that their strengths or your weaknesses, right? So definitely great advice. And I'm just going to ask you one more question because I know you're probably got somewhere else to be. Since this show's sponsored by EmotionTrac, which is a technology company, where do you think the future of the legal industry is, whether it be with AI or any other technology that could accelerate business and make things more efficient?
Well, I think of it, I don't think you ever get away from being that business advisor like we've been talking about, but and you can't replicate that through AI. So but technology is important, and clearly it's going to play a role. And I think the future, it goes beyond legal. It goes to kind of what I do now day to day, which is more lobbying, more government affairs. It's like, how do you influence people, and what moves the needle from an advocacy point of view? I think you have to look at law as, yes, you have a reference point in cases and precedent, and that's critically important, but it's how do you influence people? It's advocacy. What I do is advocacy. And so I think being more sophisticated in that regard, and thinking strategically and critically and analytically, and from a technology point of view, about how you register, whether it's in a courtroom, talking to a jury, or I'm on Capitol Hill talking to a member of Congress, what's going to resonate? And it's advocacy, and your advocacy skills are the same no matter where you're deploying them. And how can we get more sophisticated about influencing people? That's, I think, where the future of the practice of law, kind of broadly, as one element of advocacy, is headed.
Great. What a high note to end on with that answer. I love it. So thanks so much for taking the time today. This has been Jacob Wells for Latte with Lawyers. Thanks to Howard Schweitzer.
Thanks for having me
O'Connor. Of course. Thank you for joining us today. And got to thank our sponsor, EmotionTrac, without a K, that uses artificial intelligence and mobile app audiences to economically and quickly gather focus group research and data for trials and mediations. So thanks again, Howard.
Thanks, Jacob.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.